Alright, let's continue our Winter Wonderland. We are pretty much done now with the background, that is with the mountain scenes, whether it's river canyons or just background scenes. We're going to use those in images that we composite for our Winter Wonderland. But obviously some other things are going to happen in the foreground, and it might be snowfall like what I'm seeing here. But what I'm actually focusing on in this tutorial is not going to be the animation itself of how to add snowfall, but rather how to make it look like the trees have plenty of snow on top of their branches. Right? What you see here, it's not the very cleanest, not the perfect, but it shows the point of some of the techniques I want to explore. And the original brush might look like this if I clear this. So just a plain old couple of dabbles to make it look like a tree, and then after some processing we might have some sort of snowfall accumulated, maybe some icicles, maybe some ice, and even a little bit of a shady appearance here that could look like shadows from you know, the snow is all round and nicely soft and cushioning, and there's some sunlight from the top. But the lower half here is appearing somewhat shaded. That was an accidental discovery, but before we do that, just see how to add the snow in the first place. So what I'll do is I'll start with this. I'll clean the animation, free this animation, don't need this. I also want to clear out the swap image, don't need that. So we have nothing in the swap image. Now what I'm going to do is perhaps erase the main image to a slightly grayish tint. So let's get something like this here as the primary color, and erase to that primary. So we have a grayish tint. So what I'm doing is adding a brush, simply writing. Maybe I'll use the simple brush here, a large simple brush. So this one's not going to be gray, it's going to be black. Let's select black and then draw the trunk and go out with a couple of branches. It really doesn't matter how good the tree looks at this time. I just want to have some parts that show horizontal orientation, and that might be what you'll see on some of your trees, on your branches. Alright, so we have here the start of a tree, and what I'll do is I'll store that. There you go. And now the question is, how do I make it look like we get snow on top of it on the branches? And the technique is going to involve using a second copy of that same image, but shifting it upward. Right? So let's do this. Let's actually create a layer. We could work on the swap image to do that. Let's see if we can do that with the layer. If it fails, we'll go back to the swap image. So I'm going to add a layer, and this layer we will use the different modes here to see what works best here, but we need to first put the same image in here. So I'm going to clear this, click the stored copy here, and of course the default mode is multiplicative mode. We don't do opaque layers by default, but we do have other modes available, and what I'd like to do is find a mode where it's going to allow us to show the snow resting on top of these branches. Now before we do that, what we need to do really is move this tree up. So let's go grab the filter, that's the shift or transform. In the transform group here you have either the transform that can also do the scaling and the rotation, or just the shifting. Let's use the shift, that's all we need. And we could actually use just the vertical shift here. We could go with grab this hand and then shift it up. Right, so you'll see it because we have two layers. We're moving the layer that's this one here, the selected one. We're moving that one up, and right now it's showing us both. All right, we don't need to shift it sideways. Let's keep that one to 0. But let's see, what's that, about -18? That's a good number to remember. 0 here, -20. Let's make it -15. That's good enough still. Okay, that. So we have now one image still back here in the background, the other image in the layer in front, and as you adjust the opacity of that, depending on what the layer mode is, the blending mode, you'll get all sorts of funky effects here. The Phoenix mode, kind of an outline display, dissolve, not so interesting here, exclusion. Now here we see something. No, it's actually still doing, yeah, exclusion is basically showing anything that's common to both, but not one or the other. We could possibly use that for some other things, like some ice around the twigs on both sides, bottom and top side. But what we'll do here, explore some more. Let's try tracing paper. That's not it. I'm looking for one that will show bright white layers. Oops, that's not it here. Tracing paper. I thought I had one. Here's a difference mode. Of course, subtract, right? So the difference mode might do it. Let's go subtractive. Let's see where's the difference mode. Similar, but that one actually shows the absolute value of a difference. So it shows us both sides of non-overlapping. What I'd like to do really is, I think I'm going to stick with the subtractive. And really here's where you'll want to explore a little bit and see what works best for you, right? What I'm looking for is this, where it's showing the parts that are on top of the tree. Now you may not get exactly that, but you may get close to that. And you can see here, there's a way depending on how much subtractive you adjust here, you may see none of it or all of it, or just somewhere in between where you still see the tree and you see the background color different from the snowpack color. That's a good one. Let's go flatten all that. And so now we have an image we definitely want to store. Store this image copy. And by the way, if I had not done that, let's go and undo this and add another layer and shift it here like so. Still oh, and it's in opaque mode right now, so I want to make sure we blend it a little bit. Oh, and we didn't put that image in there either. What am I expecting? There's some miracles. Okay, so here we go. And so I want to show what happens if we are in subtractive mode, something like so. And we're doing the shift while it's still in two separate layers, because that's allowing you to adjust how much of that snowpack accumulation you want. Right here you see that's going low, that's no good, but that's going up, and so you can adjust you know, how much of that you want. And if you do this right, you get a nice display of snowpacks here. So one thing you'll do next is you need to isolate that. Let me go back to that stored image. Of course, this is the one I should have shifted. This is the one that already has it shifted. Let's go do that. So I'm gonna go and erase. Let's go there. This is the image that I'm gonna work from now. And what I'll do is I need to isolate those lighter parts. First of all, let's expand the dynamic range, because we know the lighter parts could be all white. Oops, that's not the right option. There it is, image, expand. There, so we get some white parts here. And the darkest parts are black, the lightest part are white. And so we can isolate those and you know, have them on top of the snow, do some processing with that. Let's see, for instance, let's go first select that. Let's go select the mid-tones, the lights. Let's go select by color and simply see if we can identify the white. So if we pick the black, we see the white. There, now we have the white selected. Okay, and once we have that white selected, what we could do is make it go bigger, grow it to a bigger amount. So selection, grow, and expand it by 4, 5, 6 pixels, and then erase that to white. Right click here on the red X and select erase to white. So now we have the snow starting to take over. It's bigger, it's taller, but it's also branching down into the branch, pun intended. You want to have it go down into and kind of cover almost into half of the branches. Could do a little bit more on that. Let's grow that selection a little bit more. Grow alpha, And this time we'll also blur it a little bit. We'll do selection, blur. There's two blur functions. There's the Gaussian blur alpha and this box. Let's use the box with the show alpha enabled, and then you can see how much blurring you're getting on that. Just a little bit, 1 or 2. Doesn't need much. And then erase that to white. Okay. So now we're getting basically that snowpack feeling on top of the branches. The other things we might want to do is actually give some texture to these branches. So I want to show you something on that. First I'll need to select them, and before that I'll store the current selection. That's the one with the snow here. So I'm going to store that. Where is it? Store alpha. Because you never know, it might be good and handy to get back to that. Also store the image. When you store the image, you get the RGB channels and the alpha. You can actually restore the alpha from here too. So there is some functionality built into that stored image there. But the next thing I want to do is select the tree bark and go here. Select shadows, for instance. That will select all the dark parts. Or you could select by color again, same thing. Or even numerically, entering the RGB values. Let's say color, select, boom, like this. And so what I'm doing here is I'm selecting that so that I can add some tree bark to that, or some sort of a texture, or paint it even, right? But one cheap way or one quick way to do that is to go to the Windows menu and select Fill Settings. And then we will use the Fill tool under the Image menu with the Fill shortcut Q. Before we do that, we need to select the mode for it. So right now it's using an image that's actually my most recent brush image that I had loaded, the custom brush. Instead, I'm going to use a different pattern here. Click on Patterns and you'll see a number of predefined patterns, and some of them are looking like tree bark and some of them may not, but they are good enough still to use to give a bit of texture, right? It might be rocks, it might be slate, it might be all sorts of different things, but it may end up looking pretty neat as a texture on that tree. Let's go into this one here. This one is pattern oak bark. All right, and what we can do then is say, well, how do we want that to be applied? Just a plain pattern fill. Let's hit Q or go to Fill Q right here, and that will add it, but it's not as good as we want. We want to kind of have vertical veins going up. So let's try Fill Horizontal Q. Not so much. Fill Vertical. Yeah, you know what? Sometimes it depends a bit on the pattern. It depends a bit on the texture itself, or on the shape of the tree. But you do get a little bit of a pattern alignment here. So you want to see if some of these are going to be good enough. Now it's too bright. So what you could do here is right click on that erase tool, erase to black, and then go with the interactive undo, this little green slider here, to say somewhere in between. That will give you a little bit better appearance there. And if you want to actually make it look more like shaded with some sunlight, really kind of a bump map effect, you could at that point stylize it, something like this here with lighting tool, and add a little bit of a stylizing intensity, coloring or texture effect to that. Let's see, multiply it to the original color if you have any color in it. Smoothness if you only care for some big patterns. All sorts of little effects to add to that. And so what I'd like to do is say, okay, for instance, keep it this way and then undo. Again, the interactive undo to just say that was nice, but it was too much. So let's adjust it a little bit. And so there you go. So now we have Control D to clear all that. Now we have a tree with a little bit more of pattern or noise or texture on there. And then of course the question is, how do we also add a bit more of this icicle thing that we had on some of the earlier trees. So let me do the following. I'm going to store this and I'm going to select the snow again. So selection, select by, I guess we can safely go by lights, the light part. There you go, the snow is selected. And I'm going to, actually I don't even need that selection yet. What I'll do is I'll clear alpha and I'll use a filter in the artistic category that's called the wet paint. Now with that, what you can see is that you can adjust what part is the wet paint. Is it black? Is it the dark pixels, or is it the bright pixels? So just select the white pixels and make them drip down a little bit like that, not too much, and okay that. And so you get a little bit of that, but the problem is that you get too much on both sides. You see it also go down the top side. You really want just the bottom. So one thing you could do is perhaps do that same effect in a separate layer, and then make that like an additive layer. Okay, so what we'll need to do is add a layer and select from this layer just the snow parts. So select the color. That's white. There you go. Okay, then we go up to the upper layer and we are in this area, and what we'd like to do is simply erase the other parts to black. So let's go invert the layer, invert the selection rather. There it is, invert alpha, and ignore the coloring for now. I mean, this part here is contributing in a fancy way, but we don't need to worry about that. We really only want to erase the entire thing to black, so right click and erase to black. And so now we have in this layer just the white snow parts, and so we can now clear the selection, maybe store it, you never know, we might need it still. Store that somewhere, and so clear the selection now and start using that filter to bring it down with the artistic snow, where is it, artistic wet paint. Right. And as we apply that wet paint, again it's going to apply also up here in the upper areas, but we can filter that later, we can ignore that later by bringing it back from the original image. So we'll see how to do that. One thing we could do is say give it really a lot of that, or perhaps adjust a little bit how much of that we get, and in fact make it an additive mode. And so we have a bit of control of that. That's probably a bit too much there, but I mean, I just want to show the technique. And so the question then is, how do we, when we look at this, we see that because we make this in additive mode, the darkening pixels that are coming down as well are not showing anymore. It's already white, it stays white. And so that's one technique we can use there. There are a couple of other techniques to use to add different types of effects, like the snow shaded modes that I showed in the original image. We'll talk about that in a separate tutorial. I just wanted to get you started on doing some of these and explore how to add some heavy amounts of snow, or just light amount of snow on some of your trees. And the trees may be very rudimentary, very simple, or they may be somewhat more sophisticated, and we will certainly create a few of those to explore further. Alright, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.